Okay, let's go. Shh. I got a million things to tell you because today we're going to talk all about the greatest symbol of Judaism. What is the greatest symbol of Judaism? So that's the mistake that most people make. Most people say it is the Star of David. It is not. The Star of David is symbolic and has been historically. However, the roots of the Star of David and why it came around, if that's really the image of it, is interesting. But there is a more historical, settle down. There is a more important, more historical, and much more verified symbol of the Jewish people, and that symbol is the menorah. Let's examine this menorah. Let's talk about it. Let's visit it. Let's see what it looked like, why it represents the Jewish people so much. From biblical times right through to the modern state of Israel, the menorah does a lot more for us. I know there's a lot of Jews walking around with stars of David on their chains and with chamsas on their chains. However, the menorah, if you want to wear anything that represents who we are as a people, the menorah is it. Let's talk about this object, who made it, what it was made from, why it was made, what was in it, what was it used for, where was it put, and why it's so important that the Greeks at the time of the Chanukah story decided to use that image to attack us, and why the fight against the Greeks represents the relighting of that menorah. Okay, let's start with some basics. What was the menorah made of?
Gold.
It was made of gold, that's right. It was pure, solid zav, pure, solid gold, made of one solid brick, and it was fashioned. There's different ways to create certain objects. One is to build up, right? Add pieces like Lego. Another is to have something solid and break it down into one piece, okay? The fact it was made of gold shows its importance and its value, not just physical value. The physical value represents the spiritual value. Where does the design come from? Where do we see the design? So the Torah itself goes into a lot of detail describing the original design of the menorah. There is an interesting machloket, difference of opinion. I don't know if there's any philosophical, I'm sure there is, in terms of the difference, but the original design is up for debate. The Rambam, Maimonides on one side, because we actually have Ksav Yad, an original design by the hand of the Rambam, and the Lubavitch movement, Chabad, are very into this design, which is why outside of every Chabad house, wherever you go, there's always the same design of the menorah. The Rambam's opinion was that the menorah, excuse my drawing over here, was straight branches. Zoy, coming down like that. Okay? That was the design of the original 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. There you go. There was the central branch and straight branches coming out. There was also goblets, and there were flowers, parachim on it as well, and knobs on it as well. All those had significance, the amount of them, but that's not today's discussion. I want to get to the menorah, and I want to get to the lights, because the whole point of the menorah was to bring out light. Okay? The other opinion, of course, is the opinion which makes it a more traditional one, which you'll see outside the Knesset, which is more of a rounded structure. Some say it looked like this, and some say it looked like that, straight or curved. This is the one most of us grow up with, this curved one. This is Rashi, I believe. Rashi gives this opinion. Tosfot over here. And this is Rambam. What's interesting, I was actually in Rome this past summer, and I stood at the Arch of Titus, Yamach Shemo, and actually there you have a design etched into the arch itself in Rome, which is the only, as far as I know, the only contemporary, well, the only design that was made at a contemporary time of the structure of the temple, of the menorah. About 70 years after the structure of the temple, they made this design of the relief that was inside, and it was actually this design. Sorry. In Rome, there is the Arch of Titus, right? After they destroyed or took over certain countries, properties, they used to make reliefs, these big arches. There the design is this form. So those who say this was the original design say, well, there you go, because this design was only 70 years after the temple. Right? It's the earliest physical present design we have now that's not in books, or pictures, okay? Or drawings, rather. So this is the one. But they say, well, it's not accurate. and this is the original design. So either way, you can go with both. Okay? It was 8.
Didn't they take it? So when they know?
Some say yes, some say no. Different opinions. We're not too sure. Okay? In that original relief, we can see them carrying it out, right? The ark, and there was actually a design there, but we're not too sure. Okay? It could have just been, from stories or whatever. It was 18 tefachim high, which is about, if a tefach is a hand's breadth, let's say 4 inches, that's 72 inches, about 6 feet tall. Okay, now on top, obviously, were little bulbs, and inside the bulbs was what? Oil. There was oil inside the bulbs that were lit every day by the high priest. Now, if they were 6 feet tall, and assuming that Aaron the high priest, right, the first high priest of the Jewish people, wasn't like this. They used to put, as the Rambam, a stone in front of it. They would climb up on it, and they would light that way. And this was the job of Aaron HaKohen. What's interesting, we have to revisit this, is the Rambam says that the Kohanim, the Leviim actually, had the opportunity to be involved in donating parts of the Mishkan, because the Menorah was located in the Mishkan, in the tabernacle. Yeah? It was located in the Mishkan. And later on, it featured very, very heavily, of course, in the Beit HaMikdash. That was the permanent home of the Menorah eventually. Right? So this was the portable tabernacle we had for 40 years in the desert. And there, basically, the Beit HaMikdash was set up, and the Menorah set there as well. And the Menorah started to represent the entire Jewish people. Now, Aaron HaKohen, the Leviim, were very upset when they realized they couldn't contribute, because they allowed everyone else to contribute first towards the construction of the Mishkan. However, the Torah tells us, in the Ramban, in a very famous treatise, talks about this. It says that Aaron HaKohen himself was relieved when he was told, or he was consoled, I should say, when he was told that although they weren't going to contribute towards the items in the Mishkan, there would be something that he would be able to do, and that is to light the lights of the menorah. Right? That was going to become the job of the high priest, keep inside the Kohanim, and it would carry on for a long time. Says the Ramban, not only that, the relief was told us that one day this menorah was going to have a central feature in the miracle of the Chanukah story. And when that happens, the miracle that's going to occur would be at the hands of the Kohanim, of the priests. Because many years later, as we described, the Chashmonaim, the Hasmoneans, were obviously the Kohanim, and they were the ones who were going to push the Greeks out. So the menorah has significance in and of itself, but it's also, even at the construction of it, was going to have significance many years later in the whole Greek story which occurred through Chanukah. Okay? All right. Now, the most important feature of the menorah, we're told, is the Ner Maravi, the central light, the western lamp as it's called. And that, according to most opinion, was the center one. And this lamp lasted all night. The others extinguished in the morning. This one was constantly lit and was considered to be miraculous. Now, there were 7 branches representing the 7 days of the week. And the wicks were actually bent into the center like this. Okay, so it's 3 on this side, 3 on this side, and 1 in the middle. Which day of the week did the one in the middle represent? Shabbat. Shabbat. But that doesn't make sense because Shabbat appears at the end of the week. Shouldn't that be the last one?
You want it to be the center.
It is the center. And actually, it works that way because actually the days of the week don't actually only go from Yom Rishon to Shabbat, 7 days, but they actually focus inwardly, meaning, and there's even a halachic imperative that's connected to this, a few of them actually. The days of the week actually go Shabbat in the middle, okay, then you have Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Yom Rishon, Sheni, Shlishi, and they're connected to the Shabbat before. And then you have Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, right, Revi, Chamishi, Shishi, and they're connected to the ones in front. So actually the days of the week, rather than going 1 through 7, actually go 3 this way, 3 this way, and then 1 in the middle. And the halachic implication of this, for example, is if a person forgets to make Havdalah on Motzei Shabbat, which is the time to make Havdalah, obviously, they can make Havdalah up till Tuesday. That's correct. When do we start to focus on the next Shabbat? On Wednesday. From Wednesday on, was already thinking towards Shabbat. So the menorah, in one way, is going to represent 7 days of the week and Shabbat is represented by the central column, right, which is constantly lit, because Shabbat is always lit in our lives. Okay? Okay, very good. Now, the word, let's have a look at the Gemara first of all. Turn to page 102. Let's go. I want to break this down as much as possible, because we're going to build up from the menorah and get to the main thing, because the menorah held the oil, and the oil is only there to give you light from the wicks, and all this is going to prepare us for the Chanukah story. So the Gemara in Shabbat tells us, well, the Torah tells us, outside of the curtain, right? There was a curtain which separated the Kodesh Kodashim from the rest of the temple. Outside of it was the menorah. Okay? Bo'el Moed, in the tent of meeting. Yarochoso Aaron, and Aaron, the high priest, would prepare it every day. He would go in, he would clear up bulbs, put in new oil, put in the wicks, and light it every single day. That was the tremendous mitzvah, and the Torah tells us that Aaron was greatly praised because he was so excited the first time he did it, he was excited the 10th time he did it, he was excited the 50th time, the 700th time. He kept realizing this mitzvah was so special. Lighting the menorah is going to represent something very, very big and central to us. Says the Gemara, does God need the light of the menorah? Why is the light of the menorah so important? The 40 years the Jewish people in the Midbar, we went from the light of God. There was a light in front of us, a physical light we spoke about before when we discussed Sukkot. There was always in front of the Jewish people by night. Right? So they had this. It says no. Ella Eiduti. It didn't come to offer physical light. The menorah did not come to give us physical light. It came to give us Eidut. What is Eidut or Eidus? It was testimony. It was testimony. This light was there as a symbolic light. Now, what's fascinating about the Beit HaMikdash was that the windows of the Beit HaMikdash were inverted. The windows were inverted. What does that mean? Usually windows were like holes in the wall. Right? And the way they were usually designed was in such a way that they would capture the light from outside, and they would come from small to big, and so the light would come in and illuminate inside the home. That's the way the windows in buildings and homes were made. However, the Beit HaMikdash was designed differently. We're told, the Gemara tells us, that the windows were inverted oppositely, meaning that the light from inside the Beit HaMikdash and the windows were caught in a certain way that the light from the inside would go to outside. Okay, so usually windows were set up so the sun's light or the moon's light would shine into a house and illuminate. But the windows in the Beit HaMikdash in the temple were done the other way, so the light from inside would go outside. Now let's think about that for a second. Why would that be? It can't be just to illuminate, because how much light is coming out of 7 bulbs, right, of oil? And we already said that the light was not needed for its lighting purposes. It was symbolic. It was testimonial light. Okay? What it represents, we don't even know yet. But you have to imagine then that people are walking around Yerushalayim and walking around the rest of Israel, and they would see a big mountain, Har HaBayit. They would see Mount Moriah. On top of it was a big, beautiful structure called the temple. And then wherever they were, and this light would travel far, they would see the light of the menorah. And they would have to remember something when they saw this light. This light was there as a testimony to something very important. It's actually going to be more than one thing. Okay? So the light, as it were, not even as it were, it did shine out right through Jerusalem, and on a clear day, we assume, right through the rest of Israel. Okay? So what exactly did the light of this beautiful menorah represent? Okay, that the Greeks so much wanted to extinguish it. Again, we're going to appreciate what the Greeks wanted to do to the Jewish people, and why the menorah and the Chanukah, the lights that represent this light, that we're going to appreciate by understanding what the light represents itself. So what was the agent? What was the testimony that a person would feel and what was this symbol? What was it doing? So the menorah gave us Orah. It gave Orah. Now the word Orah, light, let's go back to the beginning of the Bible, the Torah. The word Orah appears in the first chapter of the book of Genesis 5 times. Right? And that can be seen in the Midrash, page 103. Amar Rav Simon, Rabbi Simon says, Hey Pamim Ketiv Kan Orah. The word light is mentioned 5 times in the first paragraph of the Torah. Keneged, representing what? The 5 books of the Torah. Okay. So now we're getting somewhere. We see that the light, Orah, is mentioned 5 times. Oh, 5 represents the 5 books of Moses, the 5 books of the Torah. So the Greeks went in to the Beit HaMikdash, says, V'timu kol hashmanim, and they defiled all the oil. Why were they defiling oil? What was their problem? Right? They weren't trying to put the lights out physically. They wanted to put the lights out spiritually. Because they understood this idea. They understood that shemen, oil, represents the nefesh of the Jewish people. How do we know that? Because it's ner, shemen, petila, light, oil, wick. That's the nefesh, we said, the first letters. And if we want to attack the Jewish people, before they got to them physically, and they tried physically as well, before they get it, let's break down the soul of the Jewish people, and that's the oil. And that's what he means when he says that. Okay? They wanted to get to the lave, the heart of the Jewish people. And the heart of the Jewish people is the Torah. Because Orah equals Torah. Light equals Torah. Because Torah gives us light. Are we putting the pieces together? Okay. So he says, Klomar, when they went to attack the oil in the Beit HaMikdash, they were saying, Pagmu b'chachmat u'machshavat alev. Right? They wanted to blemish the thoughts and the feelings of the Jewish people. It's a Rov Yisrael, of the Jewish people. שהתחילו גם הם נועם בלבם אחר חוכמה של יוונים וחשבו שיש בה ממש. Right? They blemished the thoughts of feelings of the Jewish people who began to accept the wisdom of the Greeks. So the Jewish people were being affected by this Greek ideology. And no matter how much they wanted to, you couldn't help it. They were controlling Israel at the time. And the Jews were feeling, many Jews were feeling an affiliation, as we said, with the Greeks. So it wasn't Greeks against Jews, right? It was Jews against Greeks and then the Jewish Greeks. Okay? They were having internal struggles as well. However, when, as we said already, managed to fight off over a 17-year period these Greeks, look at page 104, halfway down. When these Hasmoneans entered, into the Heichal, into the Holy of Holies, into the Beit HaMikdash, they only found one shemen, tahor, one pure vessel, kli, of shemen, of oil, and it was enough for only one day's lighting. Right? Now there was a lot. We had these big bulbs, right? We said they had the 7 bulbs, and they needed one entire jar just to get one day's lighting. What does this represent? What is it? So he says, this one jar also represented something. Okay? It represented just a little bit of light that was left, this spark of true Torah wisdom that was still sacred and was still there. Okay? And it showed to them, they saw this as a sign. They saw this as a sign that we still have our chance to light, and we don't have to follow their light, they can still follow ours. Okay? This is obviously all related to the idea which Isaiah speaks about, that the Jewish people have to become a light unto the nations. The light he's referring to, obviously, is the light of wisdom, but it's represented by this menorah, because the menorah had these lights, and unlike other nations that want to force their light upon us by attacking us, killing us, right, pogroming us, holocausting us, the Jewish people say the light is there. If you want it, you can come and take it. Right? We don't light big fires. We light a single candle. Right? Wisdom is represented by this one candle. Oh, I'll mention that as well. If you take the words for the oil, which is Hashemen, I think we did this before, and I'll do it again. Hashemen, the oil, can be rearranged into Mishnah, right? Mishnah is the first time the oral law was put down into writing, so it's going to represent the Mishnah. You can rearrange it again to get Neshama, and you can rearrange it again to get Shemona. Shemona? 8. Right? 8 is going to be the key number. So Hashem in the oil becomes Mishnah. That's the oral Torah. The first time the oral Torah, it's that Torah that goes from the non-physical to the physical. So we see there's this, it's that point right between the physical and spiritual world. Right? We see it has Neshama, which is the middle level of the soul, which connects the upper with the lower. So it's the connecting factor. And Shemona, the number 8, is always going to represent the spiritual world, right? It's L'mala min hateva. And all of that can be seen in Hashem in the oil. So the oil is going to represent all of those. Got that down? You following? Okay, this is big stuff. Marvelous. So this is the light that this is the physical version of a spiritual concept. Right? It's a metaphor. It's a symbol of the Jewish people. All that came from the menorah. Okay?
What did you say the Mishnah?
The Mishnah is the first time the oral Torah, Baal Peh, was written down. So it's on the cusp between the written and the non-written. Right? It's that layer that connects the two. That which you see, that which you don't see. The first time the oral Torah is written down, that's the Mishnah. Okay? It just happens to be, it's all contained within the word Hashem in the oil. Shemona, Neshama, Mishnah, Hashem. Yeah? Marvelous. So why 8 days? Why 8 days? Right? So as we've seen already, whenever there's going to be a physical reason why 8 days, but that is going to also synthesize with a spiritual, meaningful reason as well. Okay? So let's have a look at the physical reasons, the technical reasons. So, Rav Yosef Karo, the Beis Yosef, says the following. Why do they have to light for 8 days? So he says, from this one vessel. They had a war beforehand. To get into the Beit HaMikdash, there was a war. If there's a war, there's tamei meis, there's impurity. That's coming from the dead people that are there. Okay? The ifshar lahetaken shem and tahor. That means some people were ritually impure, right, from this tamei mate, from the impurity of the war and the dead that were there. It was impossible, he says, to prepare new oil, right, until you have 7 days pass by. You need 7 days, right? Add to that 1 day which takes to actually press and get new oil out. You got your 8 days, he says. Right? Shivas yomim miyom tu masam v'yom echad lachtisha, to crush hazesim, the olives, v'tikunum lotzia mehem shem, and the shemen that came out of it. There were 3, I believe, pressings the oil went through, right? The oil of the menorah had to take the first pressing from the olive, which is the purest. After that, you get pulpy stuff in there as well. We know the Torah has to be pure, so that means the oil in the menorah had to be pure, and that's from the first pressing. So it took a lot of olives just to get those first drops out from that first pressing, and the second and third press could be used for incense or other stuff that was used for in the Beit HaMikdash. So that's one opinion. Tamei mate, they were impure. Okay, practical reason. It takes 7 days for the impurity to go, then 1 day to actually prepare it. He says, however, there's another reason. We're going to see a whole bunch. The Ran says no. Actually, it took 4 days to travel and 4 days to bring back this oil. Okay? So, they said the olive trees were elsewhere in Eretz Yisrael, and they would have to go down in order to get them. So it was an 8-day round trip. Okay? That makes sense. So this 1 jar of oil that should have lasted for 1 day lasted for 8 days, because it's going to take either 7 days and then 1 day to get rid of the impurity of the people who've been involved in war, or it takes 4 days to get, 4 days to come back. Okay, so the miracle was that this 1 jar lasted for 8 days. Okay, that's the 2 reasons that the Rav Yisrael gives for the 8-day holiday. Yeah.
I learned learned that it was 8 days because the Greeks didn't let them practice sukkahs, and they were making up for that time, and nothing to do with oil.
Could be. I've heard that. Just I haven't heard doesn't mean it's not true. It could be. Could well be. I'll give you a few more if that helps. Let's see. Maybe it'll come up somewhere.
So what was the first one?
So so far we've seen two reasons why an 8-day holiday. Okay? These are the physical reasons. One is because, says the Shulchan Aruch we just looked at, they were tamei mate. They were impure from being involved with dead bodies. Therefore they had to purify themselves in order to make and to be involved in the production. It took 7 days in order for the impurity to leave them. Okay? They had to wait 7 days after the battle. And then 1 day of creating light. So it's 8 days. Okay? So we celebrate the 8 days. Because the one jar they found lasts those 8 days. So they can produce a new one. The other one, which he gets from the Ran, says no. It's 8 days because they had one jar to last them, which lasted 8 days. 4 days to get down to get it, and 4 days to bring it back. It was a traveling thing. Okay? Another practical reason why 8 days. If those two reasons are true, we're missing something. It shouldn't be an 8-day holiday, it should be a 7-day holiday. Why? Probably the most famous question in Jewish literature. Because they had enough for 1 day, had enough oil for 1 day, then it lasted for 8 days for the two possible reasons we gave. So then we only have 7 days of miracle, right? So when we celebrate Chanukah, it should be a 7-day holiday, which will make a lot of children very upset because they want 8 days of gifts, not 1 day, right? Kidding. So that's a very famous question, which has got hundreds of answers to it. We'll give a couple of them, right? We'll give a couple of them, or a few. Turn over the page. And Rav Yosef, he gives a couple hundred himself. And he says, why 8 days? He asked the question we just asked, or we asked the question that he just asked. What have 8 days? The cave under Shemen, Shepachaya Bo, there was enough for one night. That means it's a 7-day miracle. Right? So why are you celebrating 8 days of miracle? It should be 7 days of miracle. You hear the question? Okay. So he goes like this. He goes, right. So the reason we do 8 days is because the way they operated the oil. They knew they had enough for 1 day. They knew it was going to take 8 days to get new oil, or 7 days after that, 1 day, right? So he says, well, we got to prepare. So what did they do? So he says the first one is they divided the oil in the flask into 8 portions. Okay? That means they said, I got enough for that. So they put a little bit into each one each night. So every night of the 8 nights, they put in enough to last them just a portion of the day, I guess an eighth of the day. However, the miracle was that each small portion lasted all night. They should have taken the entire portion, but they cut it up. Right? They cut up the oil they had into 8 sections, as it were, and because they knew it was going to take 8 days, and they had a little bit. The miracle was, he says, that the menorah lit until the morning, although it should have only been an eighth of what it's usually lit for. So that means on day 1, they only had enough for a part of the night, it lasted all night. Day 2, they only had enough for a part of the night, it went all night. So actually, all 8 nights, they had a miracle. That's one explanation. Va'od, yesh lomar, another explanation, is that they actually pulled the required amount of oil from the flask of lamp. They pulled the whole thing in, right? Enough for one entire night. However, the flask itself remained as full of oil as it had been originally. And the miracle was obvious even on the first night. So there was this incredible refill that miraculously happened. Right? Remember, this is Nes Nigla. We're dealing with open miracles. Right? The last open miracle. And the light... It didn't consume. Another one, he gives the third explanation, is on the first night they poured all the oil into the lamps and it stayed lit until all night. In the morning they found the lamps full of oil. And this came... So in other words, either the flask itself refilled, or actually they came every morning and the oil was still full inside the flask itself, the menorah. This is the miracle. Okay? How do we... By the way, there are hundreds more answers to this one question, but those are the main, most famous ones that we see. Divided, flask refills, or remains full, or the bulbs themselves remain full. Now, why would this need to happen? Miracles only happen when stuff is needed. What wasn't needed? The Jews could live without the menorah. And we have it 2,000 years. Why is this important? Well, it was a symbolic importance. When the Jewish people saw this open miracle happen in the Beit HaMikdash, and remember, the menorah was put up in the building in the Beit HaMikdash, everyone to see, and they saw the light, it reinvigorated them and it gave them hope. This hope, this is very important, that they got in those times was going to be the light that has lasted 2,000 years right throughout the exile that the Jewish people have been through. So it wasn't just for them. This miracle occurred for the Jewish people for generations. Okay? This light, this small light of the menorah, which Aaron himself, the first of high priest, already was being told in his day was going to occur, that his descendants were going to light this menorah time of the Chanukah story. He was also being told not just that one miracle was going to occur, but the light was going to be with us for thousands of years. Okay? And remember, the light isn't just a physical light, it represented Torah as well. Okay? This was the Torah that was going to light for us right through the generations. Okay? The 5 mentions of the word Orah are connected to the 5 books of the Torah, which is connected to the oral Torah, the explanation of the Torah that was going to light for us. The Greeks want to extinguish the menorah, meaning they want to extinguish our light. That's what they were trying to do. Okay? So when this miracle happened, it gave the Jewish people a tremendous sense of hope. If it's true then, it's true now. And that's why we don't actually light a menorah today, because the menorah is 7 branches. We light 8 lights, right? Or a Chanukah. In fact, you just have 8 lights in order, and that is meant to reinvent. And that's why Chanukah occurs in the darkest time of the year, right? When the day's the shortest, right? The light comes out the least through the dark. So the darkness of Kislev represents the darkness of our exile, which has carried on for thousands of years, and we bring a little bit of light into the exile. And that is the Or L'Goyim, the light that we give to the world, that the Jewish people are here, and Hashem's Torah still lights within us. Are we clear? Good. I said a lot. But it's all good. It's all good. Okay. So how do we light the menorah itself? What is the way to light the menorah? So interestingly, when it comes to this particular mitzvah, there's different opinions of how we do it. Now we pretty much all do it pretty much all the same. However, the Gemara itself says the following on page 107. The rabbi says, by the way, there is no tractate of Chanukah. There's a tractate of Megillah, which has got of the Purim story, and how, where, what, and all the mitzvot over there. But there's no tractate. Where do we see the whole discussion, which we've discussed up to now from the class we've done on Chanukah, of the description of the menorah? Where do we see it? In which tractate of the Talmud? It's light for light. It's in Shabbat. Where? When it's describing the Shabbat lights. So where do you find the Chanukah story, just the whole story described, in the tractate of Shabbat? Where? Discussing the Shabbat lights. Where do we light? Which, coincidentally enough, so I'm starting with my chavrota right now. Where do we see that? On Shabbat. So even in the oral Torah, in the tractate of Shabbat, that's where we find all the Chanukah story. It's found over there. So even the rabbi says, when you're discussing Chanukah, you're discussing light. You're discussing light, you're discussing Torah, you're discussing at Shabbat. Right? The Chanukah lights coincide with the Shabbat lights as well. Okay? So Shabbat Chanukah, which you can have 1 or sometimes 2 of, are very, very important. Okay? They're connecting the 2. They are juxtaposed. They're not juxtaposed, they are, one is inserted in the other. Okay? However, the laws of them are different. The way you light is different, the amount of lights is different, how you light. So the Gemara says the mitzvah of lighting the Chanukah menorah is Ner ish ubeito, 1 light per person per house. That's actually the mitzvah. 1 light per person per house. So already we see that it's a light. That's how we fulfill the mitzvah. And it's in the home. It's a home-based mitzvah. That's why we want to do this. However, it says, you know what? There's a better way to do it. Mahadrin, ner l'kol echad v'echad. A better way to do it is one per family member per house. That's the Mahadrin way. That's the beautiful way to do it. But if you want the most beautiful from the most beautiful, Mahadrin min Mahadrin, there we have a machloket. Shammai and Hillel. Interesting. Beis Shammai Omrim, Yom Rishon Madlik Shmona. Beis Shammai says, day 1, you light 8. 8 lights day 1. Mikan ve'elech pachot v'holech. And then day 2 you light. If day 1 you light 8, day 2 light 7, day 3 6, 4 5, and all the way down till you get to the 8th and you get 1 candle. Sound familiar? No, it shouldn't, because we don't do that. But that's Beit Shammai. Beit Shammai says, you know how the way to do it? The best way is night 1, if you can afford it, and oil was scarce and expensive, so 1's going to do. Then you want 1 per person in the house. But you know the best way, he says, is night 1, says Beit Shammai. Night 1, you start with 8, then 7, then 6. You start with 8 and all the way down. Who goes against Beit Shammai? Why, we'll see in a second. Who do we go against? Beit Shammai. Beit Shammai goes against Beit Hillel. Beit Hillel is the one that we all recognize, because this is how we do it to this day. And he says, no. You want Mahadrim and Hadrin? The best way to do it, like what? You do 1. And then you do 2. And then you do 3. And you do 4, all the way till you get to 8. Interesting. 2 seemingly very different interpretations. How we commemorate, how we actualize this mitzvah, which, interestingly enough, although this is rabbinic, this is a rabbinic mitzvah because this occurred after the 5 books of Moses were complete. The Rambam describes this mitzvah, and as far as I know, it's the only mitzvah he describes in the following way: Chaviva ad Mod, is a very special mitzvah. Very special. Okay? And interestingly, my daughter was born on Chanukah. Without remembering this, we actually named her Chaviva. She was born on Shabbat Chanukah. Gifts are greatly appreciated. She likes stuff. Okay? So he describes this. He says, it's not like, let's light some lamp. No. He's like, this is Chaviva. This is a very special mitzvah. Says Beit Shammai, Mahadrim and Hadrin go 8 to 1. Hillel 1 to 8. From your extensive knowledge of Hillel and Shammai, what do you think they're actually arguing about? Is there a deeper significance to this dispute between Hillel and Shammai? What are they? Now you know what the light represents. What are they really arguing about? Anybody? I'll take an answer.
Maybe Beit Hillel was, increasing the light.
So Hillel goes increase, and Shammai goes decrease. Why? What was Hillel positive, Shammai negative?
Because the light in the world is getting smaller and smaller. That's all.
What do you think? I'm sorry to make you think, by the way. I didn't mean to do that today. I was very happy just to give you notes for your notes and have you vomit them out into your final, but I do... What does someone say? Every college lecture is basically notes from the professor going to the notes of the student without passing through the minds of either. That describes it, doesn't it? I mean, not in Haji's class, no. What do you think? What's going on over here? I don't know. But I did read in a few places the following idea. Hillel was known as the one who was all racham and mercy, right? And
and he wanted to grow and build. And he says, you know, we have one light, but if you attach one light to another light, which actually you're allowed to do, right? You can light one candle to another candle, right? And that's actually the way it was lit. You just touch them off to each other. Okay? You can't light the mundane off them. It's forbidden to take the shamash, the using light, and to light your shamash off the menorah. You can't do that because these are ner mitzvot. They're very holy. And bilvad, you have to just look at them. Okay? And by the Gemara even says, the Gemara says that if you look at the lights of the menorah, it gives you children who will be smart in Torah. So even they realize the light over here brings wisdom to us, especially Torah wisdom. So Hillel's like, let's build up. Right? Torah is for everyone. Everyone comes to the Beit Midrash and has to be built up. So 1 equals 2, 2 is 8. And if everyone's doing that, Torah becomes spread. And Shammai that's not where we start. We start with 8. And then we have to whittle down to the greatest Torah scholars in the world. We've got to break it down because eventually everyone has a chilek b'Torah, but in the end, the great scholars among us are going to be the few that remain at the end. And he was breaking down to 1. That's one idea I heard of why we do this, right? It kind of characterizes who Hillel was and who Shammai was. Remember, Shammai was the one who, when if someone wanted to learn the Torah on 1 foot, right, he kicked him out. And Hillel said, come in. Right? I remember that convert in the story. It says, teach me the Torah standing on 1 foot. He summarized the whole thing. And what did Hillel say? Right? Don't do other to be one. Love everyone as love yourself. And right, spread the love. And he was all about bring everyone in. Right? Increase. And Shammai is like, no. You're cheapening the Torah that way. Right? The Torah is kadosh. These lights represent the Holy Torah, and therefore they have to be condensed and held together. Let's have a look at the Sefer Todah, and he says like this: Laila Rishon Madlik Ner Echad, a night when you light one. Umosib Chalayla, and you carry on each night Ner Echad, 1 more light. Or V'Laila Shemini Madlik Shmona Nerot. Okay, so we see that halacha is that we follow Beis Hillel when it comes to lighting the menorah. That is the approach. That is the approach. Interestingly, according to Kabbalah, it just came to my head, so I thought I'd mention it. If it's there, it must come for a reason. Hillel and Shammai, this is Kabbalah, were reincarnations of 2 other individuals. This is Kabbalah. The Arizal brings this down. Anyone know? Moshe and Aaron.
Which one's what?
Which one's which?
I feel like Moshe would be Hillel.
You think Moshe will be Hillel?
No,
Didn't you say that after Mashiach comes that like we'll look up to the
We are going to revert to Beis Shammai. That's very, very true. They say that. Right. But for now, Hillel was who? Hillel was all
I don't.
love, right? Come in, help you. What was Aaron? He was Rodef Shalom. He loved peace. So they say that Hillel was Aaron. Oh, makes sense. Because Aaron's the menorah, right? He lit the menorah. Yeah, we go with him. And so Hillel was a reincarnation of, what was Moshe Rabbeinu? Was Torah. He was Din. He was Shammai. Right? Shammai came back, it was Din. It's like, this is the Torah, you got to keep it, you got to follow the laws, right?
How many reincarnations did Moshe have?
Only you can ask me that question. If anyone gets that question, how many I don't know how many reincarnations back. Don't look like a Kabbalist to you. Am I wearing a turban?
I thought Jews don't get reincarnated unless they're animals, or is it they
Not
don't
true.
get reincarnated?
Not true. No, we'll come back. Yeah, you just made that up. Okay, but that's not for now. Okay, I have other classes online. You can watch that one. Ha'itza lo menorah kavur shoshmona nerot. If one has fixed menorah of 8 lights, right? How does he do it? So the way we do it is like this. You light the first light first. Okay? So basically the menorah is set up as Zoe, as right? Like that. And then we put the menorah from the right hand side, right? So those outside we'll see it from the left going. And you light the first light. This is night 1. Okay? So night 2, we want to do Mahadrim and Hadrin, and we're in the world of Hillel. Okay, Mahadrim and Mahadrin, and the word of Hillel.
Where is your Shamash?
So, Shamash is elsewhere. Wherever it is. Okay. So night 2, what am I going to do? So night 2, this becomes 1, and this becomes 2. So you're going to light this one first, because this light over here is that night's lighting, the second night. So you light the second candle first. But then you have to light, because it's the second night. People are going to know it's the second night. We're going to Mahadrim and Mahadrin. So we light the second one. You light the first candle second. You following? Then on the third night, what am I going to do? Well, I have to light the third candle first, because that's the night light. That's the light of the night. So this one goes first. Right? Yesterday's that was first is now second. Yeah. And then the third light is the first one ranked over here, but that goes third. And this carries on every single night. This comes 1, 2, 3, 4. This then becomes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, on and on until you end up with 8 lights.
Isn't that why we light from the left?
That's why you light, because you're lighting the newest one first.
Okay.
You're lighting that night's first. That's the light of that night. And then you're gonna go Mosif Holech. We're gonna move forward. We're gonna build up. All right, we go like Hillel. That's what he's saying. Does everyone follow that? Yeah, that's the way it works. Haisalo Menorah kavur shel shmona neros. Malayla risha madlikas haner hakitzoni shebetzad yamin. On the first night, you light the first one on the right-hand side, the extreme one. Lamacharat Mosif alav, you add to it. Shchenu small, its neighbor to the left. That's what you start with. Umadlikaso tchila, you start with that one. Upon liyamin, but you go towards the right. Madlik zeh shelet mol, then you write yesterday's light. V'ken b'cholayla, every single night. Shemosif tamid, you're always adding mitzad small from the left. Uvo madlik techila v'holech or madlik small liyamin. Right? You like the left one, then the one to the right. The left one, then one to the right. You go that way. Idea being that you are increasing, but you've got to do that night's candle. You can't start here on the third night because that's not the third night's candle. The third one is. Make sense? And that's the way we do it. Nohagim, there's a custom. Rakel, sofer. Lahadlik b'chol layla ner echad, nosef. To light an extra additional candle. Al nerut Chanukah, who nikra shamish, which is the shamish. Right? The extra candle, klomar, nezeh, this light of the shamish, right? The serving candle, zeh mutar l'shamish, but you can use for anything else. You can use that light. So this other light that we light is going to be there to serve the other lights. And this you can use for anything. This can be used for mundane purposes. Right? You want to light a cigarette off it? Well, I wouldn't do that. But that would particularly be permitted, right? Why? Why do we need the shamish? Why does this custom come around? Because these nerot kodoshem, they are holy. And reshut l'shemesh b'hem, you cannot use them for anything, el rotem bilvad, except to see them. And this is a big difference. Shabbat lights, as we'll see next semester, are there to be used. You should use them, which is why the best place to light is by your Shabbat table, right? So you can use the light of the Shabbat candles. You don't use them too close because you may come to mess with them, but the light of the Shabbat candles are there to be used. The Chanukah lights are the exact opposite. You cannot use them for any mundane purpose. You cannot count things next to them. You cannot use the light from them to find something. They are kadosh. Oh, the shamish you can, not the lights. You cannot light anything else off those lights except themselves. They are holy, in a sense, and this is going to sound strange. They are more holy than the Shabbat lights. Right? It doesn't say that about the Chanukah lights. There's more kedusha in the Chanukah lights than there is in the Shabbat lights, which is wild because Shabbat lights is a beautiful, very important mitzvah, right? We're not diminishing the light of the Shabbat candles. Well, we're just elevating the light of the Chanukah lights. Yeah? That's what he says. Ve'ilu nerot Chanukah asur shemesh la'oram kol zman shem delukim b'mitzvah. Right? Whenever they're lit for the mitzvah, and how long that is a discussion we can have. That there's a minimum amount of time we'll discuss next class. Lefikach madlikim et hashamesh, we light the shamash, kadei shelo yavo lanuach min mitzvah, take away from mitzvah, ela memenu bilvad. Okay? Except you use the shamash. Okay, so the shamash is there to help us and to remind us that we don't use these lights that are very, very holy. They are not to be used for anything else. They're used only for their own purpose. Okay? Which obviously equals what we use Torah for. Okay? Okay. I'm done. We'll pick this up next class, God willing.